The night was cold, and the full moon illuminated the deserted streets of a humble neighborhood. Clara, her arms full of bags containing basic supplies for her grandmother, walked briskly. The cold wind howled, but her mind was too preoccupied with overdue bills and yet another failed job interview. Suddenly, a deafening noise shattered the silence, the sound of a car skidding violently. Clara ran toward the sound, her legs moving more from adrenaline than reason. At the end of the street, a luxury car had overturned, thick smoke escaping from the hood. "Help!" a muffled voice called from inside. Without a second thought, Clara dropped the bags on the ground and rushed to the vehicle. "Is anyone there?" she shouted, leaning to see through the shattered window. "In here," the man coughed, his voice weak. Clara pulled at the door with all her strength, but it was jammed. Ignoring her growing fear, she found a rock and smashed the remaining glass, managing to pry the door open with effort. The man, an elegant figure, but clearly shaken, was trapped by the seat belt. "We need to get out of here. The car could catch fire," she said, her eyes fixed on the flames starting to creep from the engine. With a combined effort, Clara freed the seat belt and helped the man out. They had barely moved away when the car exploded, lighting up the night in shades of orange and red. Clara shielded her face from the heat as the man fell to his knees, gasping for air. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, her voice full of concern. "I think so. You saved me." He looked at her for the first time, his gray eyes gleaming under the fiery light. "That's what matters. I need to call an ambulance." Clara began searching her pockets for her phone. "No, I'm fine," he said, trying to stand, but staggering. "Don't be stubborn. You're injured," as Clara insisted. He studied her, fascinated by the determination in her brown eyes and the unexpected strength in her slender figure. He, Arthur Belmont, millionaire and owner of one of the country's largest companies, had never met anyone like her, direct, courageous, and completely unaware of who he was. Arthur leaned on Clara as she helped him sit on a bench nearby, her hands trembling from both effort and the shock of what had just happened. She pulled out her phone again, determined to call for help. "Please, Arthur," said his voice firm despite his weakened state. "No ambulances. I'll manage." CLA stopped frowning. "Manage? You just escaped an exploding car. You need a doctor." He let out a dry laugh. "Doctors come with questions, and questions lead to unnecessary complications." Clara crossed her arms, glaring at him. "Unnecessary complications? Your life was just saved, and you're worried about what? Publicity?" Arthur blinked, caught off guard by her sharp tone. Few people dared to speak to him like that. "No one actually. It's not about publicity," he said softly, attempting to stand. "It's just complicated." Clara rolled her eyes, but didn't press further. She helped him up, noticing how heavy he leaned on her. "Fine, your choice, but you're lucky to be alive, mister." "Where should I take you?" Arthur gestured vaguely. "Down the street. There's a hotel nearby. I can rest there." She hesitated, her instincts warning her not to trust a complete stranger yet. Looking at his pale face and the torn, smoke-stained suit, she couldn't just leave him alone. "All right, but if you collapse, I'm dragging you to the ER. No questions asked." He smirked faintly. "Fair enough." As they walked, the silence between them was broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Clara finally broke it, unable to contain her curiosity. "So what's your name?" "Arthur," he replied, his voice guarded. "Arthur." She pressed. "Just Arthur." She shot him a skeptical glance, but let it slide. "Well, Arthur, I'm Clara. And for the record, you're lucky I was around. Not everyone would have run toward a burning car." He gave her a sidelong glance. "I've noticed. And Clara, for the record, I owe you my life." The words hung in the air, heavier than Clara expected. She brushed it off with a shrug. "Just doing the right thing." When they reached the hotel, Arthur insisted on paying for a cab to take her home despite her protests. "It's the least I can do," he said firmly, handing her a wad of cash that made her eyes widen. "Are you crazy?" Clara hissed, shoving the money back into his hand. "I don't need this." Arthur raised an eyebrow, unused to such a reaction. "Consider it cab fare. I don't live far. Save it for someone who actually needs it." Before he could argue further, Clara turned and walked away, her figure disappearing into the dimly lit street. Arthur stood there for a long moment, his thoughts swirling. She didn't want the money. No one ever refused him. Arthur woke up the next morning in the hotel, but his mind wasn't there. The image of Clara, determination in her eyes, and unexpected strength in her demeanor lingered. He was a man used to forgetting faces, even important ones. But Clara, she had stayed sipping coffee while skimming the newspaper in the hotel lounge. Arthur called his personal assistant. "Ryan, I need you to find something for me," Arthur said without preamble. "What exactly, sir?" Ryan replied with his usual efficiency. "A woman. She lives in a modest neighborhood near Park Avenue. Her name is Clara." Started discreet investigation. Ryan hesitated for a moment. "Understood. But if I may ask, is this related to the accident? Arthur ignored the question. Just find out what you can. I want to know where she lives, what she does, everything. As Arthur ended the call, he couldn't shake the strange feeling coursing through him. Why exactly was he so interested? Sure, she had saved his life. But it wasn't just that. Her honesty, her refusal to accept the money, it intrigued him. On the other side of the city, Clara adjusted her bag as she left home for another round of job hunting. Her grandmother, Donna Estella, sat in her rocking chair in the living room, knitting calmly. Will you be out long, dear? Donna Estella asked in her soft voice. Clara forced a smile. I'll try not to be. I have 3 places to visit today. Donna Estella nodded, but Clara caught the worry in her grandmother's eyes. The bills were piling up, and her pension barely covered the necessary medications. Closing the door with a sigh, Clara felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. At her first interview of the day, the cafe manager eyed her dismissively. Do you have experience as a barista? He asked, already sounding bored. Not exactly, but I'm a quick learner, and we need someone with experience. Thank you for coming. Clara left the place with the familiar sting of rejection. At the second location, it wasn't much different, and at the third she wasn't even seen. When she finally returned home exhausted, she found Donna Estella napping in her chair. Clara gently stroked her grandmother's hand, her thoughts swirling. How could she support both of them? That same evening, Ryan arrived at the hotel with a complete report. Clara Mendes, 24 years old, lives with her grandmother Donna Estella in a modest house, has worked odd jobs, but has been unemployed for months. She's clearly struggling financially. Arthur took the report and read it in silence. When he finished, his eyes were dark. I want her hired. A basic administrative position at the company, something that won't seem forced. Ryan frowned. That seems unusual, sir. Just do it, and make sure she doesn't know I'm involved. Arthur stood and walked to the window. He didn't know exactly what was driving him, but there was something special about Clara, and he wanted to find out why. Clara sat at the small dining table, carefully balancing the monthly expenses on a notepad. The numbers didn't lie. They were barely scraping by. Her grandmother's medications took up most of their budget, leaving little for food or utilities. She sighed, brushing her hair back. As she stared at the list of rejected job applications beside her, her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of her old flip phone. She grabbed it, expecting another reminder about unpaid bills. Instead, a calm professional voice greeted her. Hello, is this Miss Clara Mendes? Yes, speaking. This is Marta Silva from Belmont Enterprises. We came across your profile and wanted to invite you for an interview for an administrative assistant position. Clara froze, her grip tightening on the phone. Belmont Enterprises, that was one of the biggest companies in the country. Are you sure you've got the right person? She asked hesitantly. Yes, Miss Mendes, we're certain your name was referred to us, and we believe you'd be a good fit. Clara's chest tightened. Referred by whom? It didn't make sense. All right, she said cautiously. When should I come? Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Our office address will be sent to your phone. Please bring a copy of your resume. As the call ended, Clara sat in stunned silence. Her heart raced with a mix of hope and doubt. Was this real? At Belmont Enterprises, Arthur leaned back in his chair as Ryan entered his office. It's done. She's been contacted, Ryan said. Arthur nodded, keeping his face impassive. Good, and sure she feels welcomed, but not suspicious. Ryan hesitated before speaking again. Sir, I still don't understand why you're doing this, hiring someone with no experience for such a competitive position. Arthur's expression darkened. Let me worry about that. Ryan gave a small nod and left alone. Arthur glanced at Clara's file on his desk. Her face stared back at him from a grainy photo, a mix of determination and vulnerability in her eyes. The next morning, Clara stood outside the towering glass building of Belmont Enterprises, clutching her worn leather bag. The size and sophistication of the place made her feel out of place. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the revolving doors and approached the receptionist. I'm here for an interview, Clara Mendes, she said nervously. The receptionist smiled and directed her to the 14th floor. Stepping into the elevator, Clara's hands grew clammy. When the doors opened, a woman in a tailored suit greeted her warmly. Miss Mendes, welcome. I'm Marta Silva, the HR manager. Please follow me. As Clara was led into a sleek conference room, she felt both excitement and unease. Marta began asking questions about her past jobs, her skills, and her ability to adapt. Clara answered as honestly as she could, though she worried her lack of formal experience would disqualify her. Finally, Marta closed her notebook and smiled. Congratulations, Miss Mendes, you've got the job. Clara blinked, her breath catching. I do. Yes, you'll start on Monday. We'll send the Details to your email. Staggering out of the building an hour later, Clara felt like she was dreaming. A part of her couldn't help but wonder why her from his office. Arthur watched as Claire exited the building, her expression a mixture of joy and disbelief. He couldn't help but smile. There was something satisfying about giving her this chance. But another thought lingered in his mind. Why was he so invested? Clara stood in front of her small closet, pulling out her neatest blouse and trousers. They were faded but clean, and she had carefully ironed them the night before. Today was her first day at Belmont Enterprises. Anxiety twisted in her stomach, but she couldn't let it show. "You look beautiful, my dear," said Grandma Estella from her chair. Smiling softly, Clara turned to her grandmother, who looked proud despite her frail frame. "Thank you, Grandma. I'll do my best." Grandma Estella reached for Clara's hand. "I know you will. You deserve this opportunity." With renewed determination, Clara kissed her grandmother's cheek and left the office floor of Belmont Enterprises buzzed with activity. Clara's wide eyes took in the glass walls, sleek desks, and well-dressed employees. She felt completely out of place in her worn outfit, but she held her head high. "Miss Mendes, welcome back." Marta Silva approached her with a smile, holding out a badge with Clara's name and photo. Clara took it with trembling fingers. "Thank you for this opportunity. I'll work hard." "We're glad to have you. Let me introduce you to your supervisor," Marta said, leading her down the hall. They stopped at a spacious corner office, and a tall man with glasses looked up from his desk. "This is Mr. Daniel Ferreira, HEK, your direct supervisor," Marta explained. Daniel stood, offering Clara a firm handshake. "Nice to meet you, Clara. We'll start with a quick orientation and go over your tasks." Clara nodded, her nerves buzzing. She couldn't afford to mess this up. Throughout the day, Clara focused intensely on learning her responsibilities. Filing reports, organizing schedules, and managing emails felt overwhelming at first, but she quickly adapted. Daniel seemed impressed by her eagerness. During lunch, Clara found herself sitting alone in the employee lounge, nibbling on a simple sandwich she had packed. Nearby, a group of colleagues chatted about luxury vac and expensive restaurants. "Have you seen the CEO yet?" one of them asked. "Arthur Belmont. I hear he's incredibly intimidating," another replied. Laughing nervously, Clara tuned them out. Arthur Belmont's world seemed light years away from hers, and she had more important things to focus on. Later that evening, Arthur leaned back in his chair, watching the footage from the security cameras in the office. He had instructed Ryan to set up discreet surveillance to ensure Clara's transposition went smoothly. On the screen, he saw her sitting at her desk, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked different from the polished employees around her, but there was something refreshing about her authenticity. Ryan entered the office, breaking Arthur's focus. "She seems to be adjusting well." Arthur nodded. "Good. Keep an eye on her progress, but don't intervene unless necessary." Ryan hesitated, then asked, "Are you planning to interact with her directly?" Arthur didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the screen. "Not yet." Clara returned home exhausted, but smiling. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. "How was it, dear?" Grandma Estella asked eagerly. Clara sat beside her grandmother, recounting every detail of her first day. "It's the beginning of a new life," Grandma Estella said, squeezing her hand. Clara hoped so. For now, she would focus on doing her best and proving her worth, unaware of the man silently watching over her from the shadows of his empire. The next few days at Belmont Enterprises were a whirlwind. Clara worked long hours, mastering spreadsheets, handling scheduling, and learning the ropes of the corporate world. Daniel was always professional, but warm, offering her guidance whenever needed. Despite her discomfort in the high-end office environment, Clara pushed through, determined to prove herself. However, as days passed, something started to change. Arthur Belmont, whom she had only heard about in passing, seemed to take a growing interest in her. He was never overtly present, but Clara began to notice subtle signs. The way her tasks were always assigned to her with precision, the way her performance was quietly monitored by his assistants. She couldn't quite place it, but she felt as though someone was watching her every move. One afternoon, Clara was sitting at her desk, engrossed in a pile of work, when she received an email notification. She clicked ISTHP open, thinking it was just another report to review. But this time, it was different. "Miss Mendes, I'd like to invite you to dinner tonight. It's important that we discuss a few things." Arthur Belmont. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Dinner? Why would the CEO of the company want to have dinner with her? Her thoughts raced. Could this be a test? Was she being considered for something more? She quickly gathered herself, reminding herself of the professionalism she had to maintain. That evening, Clara arrived at A lavish restaurant, the kind she had only read about in magazines. The host escorted her to a private booth, where Arthur was already seated. He looked impeccable, as always, in a dark suit that somehow seemed to reflect his cold, detached nature. "Miss Mendes, I'm glad you could join me," Arthur said, his voice smooth and controlled. Clara sat down, trying to calm the nerves bubbling in her chest. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Belmont. I'm honored." Arthur studied her for a moment, his piercing eyes searching her face before leaning back in his chair. "I've been watching your progress, Clara. You're a fast learner, more so than I anticipated." Clara swallowed hard. "I appreciate that, Mr. Belmont. I'm just trying to do my best." A slight smile tugged at the corner of Arthur's lips. "I'm not the kind of man who tolerates incompetence, but I have a feeling you're different." Clara's chest tightened. Was he saying this because he was impressed, or was there an ulterior motive? She wasn't sure. Over dinner they spoke about work, nothing too personal. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Arthur was probing, trying to get a better understanding of her beyond the professional persona she maintained. "What do you do in your spare time, Clara?" he asked, his tone unexpectedly gentle. She hesitated. "I spend time with my grandmother. I'm the one who takes care of her. She's elderly, and she can't do much on her own." Arthur's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, but he quickly masked it with an indifferent expression. "Family is important." "Yes, it is," Clara replied, feeling the weight of the conversation. She could tell Arthur wasn't the type to express emotion easily, but something about him intrigued her. It was as if there were layers to him hidden beneath the cold exterior. The evening ended with a polite exchange of pleasantries, and Arthur stood to leave. He didn't offer to walk her out as Clara had half expected. Instead, he gave her a nod, as if she were just another colleague to him. "Good night, Clara. I'll see you at the office tomorrow." "Good night, Mr. Belmont, and thank you again." As Clara made her way back to her small apartment, she couldn't help but reflect on the dinner. Arthur Belmont was as enigmatic as the world he inhabited, but something in the way he looked at her, something behind those cold eyes, made her wonder if there was more to him than the ruthless CEO everyone spoke about. Later that night, as Clara sat at her desk working on a report, her phone buzzed with a new message. "I noticed your dedication. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Arthur Belmont. Clara blinked at the message. It was unexpected. In all the time she had spent working at Belmont Enterprises, no one had ever reached out to her like this. It was subtle, yet it left a deep impression on her. She stared at the screen for a few moments, feeling a growing connection, even though she knew it was complicated. Could this be the start of something more, or was she just reading too much into it? The days that followed seemed to blur together for Clara. Work at Belmont Enterprises continued to demand her full attention, and she threw herself into her tasks with even more determination. But there was a part of her that couldn't forget the dinner with Arthur. The message he had sent lingered in her mind, making her wonder what it truly meant. She tried to shake the thought away, reminding herself that she was just another employee to him, nothing more. However, the more she thought about it, the more Clara realized that something had changed. Arthur's behavior, though still enigmatic, seemed to have softened. When it came to her, she could feel his eyes following her at the office. The subtle way he made sure she was included in important projects. She knew it was part of his role as CEO, but there was a tension in the air whenever they interacted, a tension she hadn't been able to ignore. A week after their dinner, Clara found herself in the break room, making a quick cup of coffee before heading back to her desk. As she poured the hot liquid into her cup, the door swung open, and Arthur entered. He looked as composed as ever, his suit immaculate, and his face as unreadable as always. "Miss Mendes," he greeted her, his voice low, but with an edge that made her heart race. "Mr. Belmont," Clara replied, attempting to sound calm. Her nerves betrayed her, and she quickly lowered her gaze. Arthur walked over to the counter, standing next to her as he made his own coffee. For a moment, there was an uncomfortable silence between them. Clara could feel his presence like a shadow, something she had learned to recognize but never fully understand. "I see you're still keeping up," he said, finally, his gaze shifting from his cup to her. "Your reports have been exempted." Clara nodded, unsure of how to respond. "Thank you, Mr. Belmont. I'm just doing my job." "Yes, well." He paused, and for a brief moment Clara saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there, something unspoken. "You're a hard worker, Clara. I respect that." She swallowed, feeling an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. "I try my best." Arthur took a step closer, his voice lowering. "I believe you. I've been following your progress closely. I want to see you succeed here." Clara turned slightly, catching his gaze. There was something different in his eyes now, something that wasn't just professional, but personal. Before she could think too much about it, Arthur cleared his throat, stepping back to his usual distance. "I'll see you later, Miss Maindes. Goodbye." "Mr. Belmont," she replied softly, trying to maintain her composure. As she watched him leave, the rest of the day felt like a blur for Clara. She couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Arthur had been kind to her, but it was more than just kindness. There was something else in his words, something hidden beneath the surface. Later that evening, as Clara returned to her apartment, she found Donna Estella sitting by the window, knitting. The warm glow of the lamp illuminated her face, and Clara couldn't help but smile as she sat beside her grandmother. "How was your day, dear?" Donella asked, glancing up from her work. "It was fine," Clara replied, though her mind was elsewhere. "It's just I think something's changed at work." Don Stella raised an eyebrow, sensing the unease in Clara's voice. "What do you mean?" Clara hesitated. "Arthur Belmont, HEK, been paying more attention to me, not just as my boss, but differently. I don't know what it means." Donna Stella said with an annoying smile. "Love, my dear, can be a complicated thing." Clara laughed nervously. "It's not love, Grandma. It's just confusing. I don't know if he sees me as a colleague or something else." Donna Estella put down her knitting, her expression softening. "Follow your heart, Clara. But remember, don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Stay true to yourself." Clara nodded, taking comfort in her grandmother's words, though a part of her couldn't help but wonder if Arthur was starting to see her differently, and if so, what would it mean for both of them? The following week, Clara found herself in a meeting with Daniel and several other colleagues discussing an upcoming project. Arthur had requested her input on the project, which was a first. She felt the eyes of her colleagues on her, but she focused on the task at hand, doing her best to contribute valuable ideas. As the meeting continued, Clara glanced over at Arthur, who was sitting at the head of the table, watching her closely. His eyes were intent, but there was a softness in his gaze that made her heartbeat quicken. After the meeting, as everyone was gathering their things, Arthur stood and approached her. "Good work, Clara," he said, his voice quieter now, away from the eyes of the room. "I was impressed with your input. You've been a valuable asset." Clara smiled, though her heart was racing. "Thank you, Mr. Belmont. I'm just doing my best." Arthur nodded, stepping closer. "Keep it up. I'm looking forward to seeing what else you're capable of." The tension between them was palpable, but neither spoke of it. As Clara watched him leave, she couldn't help but wonder just how much her life was about to change. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Clara. She had become a key player at Belmont Enterprises, her performance exceeding all expectations. Her work ethic was unmatched, and Arthur took note of it at every turn. Though their interactions were professional, there was an undeniable shift between them. The subtle gestures, the lingering glances, the private conversations, it all made Clara's heart race. But every time she caught herself feeling something more than professional admiration for Arthur, she quickly reminded herself of their differences. Clara was still struggling to make ends meet, caring for her grandmother, who was growing weaker with age. The weight of her responsibilities never left her, but her position at Belmont Enterprises had opened new doors that could change her life if she dared to walk through them. One afternoon, Clara sat in her office reviewing a proposal when her phone buzzed. She picked it up to find a message from Arthur. "Meet me in my office in 10 minutes. We need to talk about something important." Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help but feel nervous. What did he want to discuss? She had no idea. But she couldn't let her mind wander. She had to remain professional. She gathered her thoughts and walked down the hall to Arthur's office. When she knocked and entered, Arthur was standing by the window looking out over the city. He turned as she entered, his usual cool demeanor in place, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "Clara," he greeted her, his voice low and controlled. "Mr. Belmont, you wanted to speak with me?" Clara asked, trying to keep her tone steady. Arthur motioned for her to sit, and she did, nervously smoothing the fabric of her skirt. There was a long pause, and Clara couldn't help but feel the weight of his gaze on her. "I've been impressed with your progress here," Arthur said, his voice calm but firm. "You've shown initiative, dedication, and talent. I believe it's time for you to take on more responsibility." Clara blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "More responsibility?" she asked. Arthur nodded. "I'm offering you a promotion, a senior role in the company. You'll have more control over the projects, and your voice will be heard more prominently in meetings." Clara's mind raised. A promotion? This was everything she had worked for, but part of her hesitated. Was Arthur offering this because of her professional abilities, or was there something else at play? That's incredible, Mr. Belmont," she said, trying to keep her excitement in check. "I won't disappoint you." Arthur smiled slightly, though there was a trace of something else in his expression. I know you won't, Clara. You've proven yourself time and again. Clara couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. But at the same time, she felt a rush of unease. Arthur's interest in her was starting to cross the line from professional to personal, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that. She had to be careful. She was still the girl from the small town, the one who had nothing but her hard work and dreams. Arthur Belmont was a world away from her, and she couldn't afford to get caught up in the allure of his world. As Clara returned to her desk, her mind buzzed with a mixture of excitement and doubt. She had been given a golden opportunity, one she could not turn down. But what did it mean for her relationship with Arthur? And more importantly, what did it mean for her life outside of work? Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her grandmother. Clara, I've been thinking maybe you should give yourself a break. You're doing so much for me. Maybe it's time to let someone else help. Clara felt a pang of guilt. Her grandmother had always been there for her, and Clara couldn't bear the thought of failing her now. But Donna Estella was right. Clara had been burning the candle at both ends, and the pressure was starting to take its toll. She sat down at her desk and took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She had to make a decision about her career, about Arthur, and about the future she wanted to create. That evening, Clara sat by her grandmother's side, deep in thought. Donna Estella could sense that something was bothering her. What's on your mind, Clara? She asked gently, her knitting needles clicking together. I'm not sure what to do, Grandma. Clara admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. I've been offered a promotion at work. It's a huge opportunity, but I don't know if I'm ready for it. And then there's Arthur. Donna Estella paused, her knitting, looking at Clara with a knowing smile. Aurora, I can see it in your eyes. You're not just talking about the job, are you? Clara felt her face flush. I don't know what you mean. Her grandmother reached over and placed a hand on hers. I can see it, my dear. You've got feelings for him, haven't you? Clara sighed. I don't know what to think anymore. I'm scared, Grandma. What if Hume's just using me for my work? What if it's all just business? Donna Estella chuckled softly. You're so much like your mother. She doubted herself too, you know, but she always followed her heart. Clara smiled weakly. I don't know if I'm ready to take that leap. Life is about taking chances, Clara, and sometimes you have to trust that the people who care about you will be there no matter what. That night, Clara lay in bed, her mind racing. She had always prided herself on her independence, on how far she had come on her own, but now with the promotion and the growing tension with Arthur, she found herself at a crossroads. Could she take this leap? Could she let herself be vulnerable both in her career and in her heart? The answer, she realized, was more complicated than she had imagined. The following days after the promotion were both exhilarating and daunting for Clara. The weight of the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders felt heavier than ever. She was now managing her own team, contributing more actively to the company's strategies, and attending meetings where her voice was no longer just a whisper among the crowd. It mattered. But amidst all the triumphs, there was a nagging thought that wouldn't leave her mind. Arthur. The more time they spent together at the office, the more Clara realized how deeply she was affected by him. She'd always admired his intellect, his ambition, and the way he carried himself. But now it was more than admiration. Every smile, every glance he sent her way made her heart race. She tried to push those feelings aside. She had worked too hard to get where she was to let emotions complicate her career. But when Arthur came up to her desk late one afternoon, his usual calm demeanor was replaced with something more intense. Clara, could you come to my office for a moment? His voice was low, almost like a command, but there was a hint of something else in it, a quiet urgency. Of course, Clara replied, her voice betraying a slight tremor. She gathered her things and followed him down the hall, her heart beating faster with every step. Arthur's office was vast, the view of the city skyline stretching behind him as he stood by the large window, his back turned to her. Clara noticed the tension in his posture, the way his shoulders were slightly stiff. You wanted to see me, Mr. Belmont? She asked, standing in front of his desk. Arthur turned to face her, his expression unreadable. I've been thinking about our project, he said, his eyes searching hers. You've done excellent work so far, but I need to talk to you about something more. Clara's stomach twisted. Personal. What did he mean by that? Was he finally going to address the undercurrent of tension between them? Personal, she echoed, her voice quiet. Arthur hesitated for a moment, then walked toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. The space between them felt charged thick with unspoken words. He stopped just a few feet away from her. I've noticed something, Clara, he began, his voice softening as though trying to gauge her reaction. Something about you that I can't quite ignore. Clara's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? He took another step closer, his voice lowering further. I've been trying to keep things professional, but every time we interact, I can't help but feel something more. And I think you felt it too. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. She felt a rush of emotions, surprise, fear, hope. All at once she opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She wasn't sure what to say. Clara, Arthur's voice was barely above a whisper. Now, I want to be honest with you. I can't keep pretending that this is just business between us. I've never met anyone like you. You challenge me. You make me want to be better, both as a businessman and as a person. Clara's mind spun. Arthur Belmont, this cold, calculating businessman, was confessing something to her. She had always seen him as someone unreachable, someone so far removed from her world. But now here he was standing in front of her, revealing something that made her chest tighten with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. But Clara began, struggling to find her voice. We can't let this affect our work. I can't let my feelings get in the way of everything I've worked for. Arthur's expression softened, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. I'm not asking you to abandon everything you've worked for. I'm asking you to consider that there might be something here worth pursuing outside of work. Just you and me. Clara felt the weight of his words sink in, and for a moment, all the doubts, all the fears that had been swirling in her mind seemed to vanish. The reality of their situation was still so complicated, but in that moment she allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to cross that line with him. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice trembling. I have responsibilities, Arthur, my grandmother. My life isn't like yours. I don't have the luxury of letting everything go and seeing where this goes. I can't afford to make mistakes. Arthur reached out, gently taking her hand in his. I understand, but I want you to know that I'm here, Clara. I'm not going anywhere. I want to give this a chance no matter what. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to take that leap. But could she really? Could she truly allow herself to love a man who was in so many ways out of her league? That evening Clara returned home, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had never been good at letting her guard down, but with Arthur it felt impossible to keep it up. Everything in her screamed to protect herself, to keep her distance. But her heart was telling her something different. Donna Estella, who had been dozing off in her chair, looked up as Clara entered. Clara, my dear, you look like you've seen a ghost, her grandmother said with a smile. Clara chuckled softly, though it was void of humor. I don't know what to do, Grandma. Arthur, he's been so different lately. He said some things today that made me question everything. Like what? Donna Estella asked, leaning forward with interest. He confessed that he wants to pursue something with me outside of work. But I don't know if I can handle that. My life is complicated, Grandma. I'm barely managing everything as it is. Her grandmother's eyes softened. You don't have to decide anything right now, Clara. But I'll tell you this, sometimes you have to take risks. You can't always control the outcome, but you can choose to follow your heart. Clara sat down beside her, her head heavy with thoughts. I'm scared, Grandma. What if I ruin everything? You won't ruin anything, Donna Estella said with conviction. But don't close yourself off from happiness. It might surprise you. As Clara lay in bed that night, she stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. Arthur had opened a door, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to walk through it. But deep down she knew that whatever she decided, nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed Clara's conversation with her grandmother were filled with a new sense of uncertainty. She had spent hours thinking about Arthur's confession, trying to balance her growing feelings for him with her fears and responsibilities. Every moment in the office was filled with an electric tension, a silent understanding between them that something was shifting. But Clara knew that decisions like this couldn't be rushed. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, she sat at her small kitchen table staring at a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Donna Estella was asleep in her chair, her quiet breathing the only sound in the room. Clara felt the weight of her world pressing down on her, the mounting bills, her grandmother's health, the job that demanded more of her with every passing day. How could she risk everything for someone who on the surface seemed so out of her reach? But the thought of Arthur lingered in her mind, the way he looked at her with that intensity, the way he was willing to break through the walls she had built around herself. She had spent so long protecting herself, guarding her heart from disappointment. But was that really the life she wanted? The following morning, Arthur called her to his office again. This time, Clara's heart didn't race in fear. Instead, it was filled with a nervous anticipation, as though today was the day something would finally change. She took a deep breath, straightened her blouse, and walked toward his office, her footsteps steady, but her mind racing. Arthur was standing by the window when she entered. His back turned to her. The city below seemed vast and impersonal, but in that moment the only thing Clara could focus on was him. "Clara," he said without turning around, "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about the other day, and I know things aren't simple for you, but I want you to know that I'm not asking for you to make any decisions today. All I'm asking is that you don't shut me out." Clara felt a lump form in her throat as she walked closer. The tenderness in his voice was enough to make her heart ache. "I'm not shutting you out," she whispered. I need time, Arthur, to figure out if I can really do this. My life is complicated, and I can't afford to make mistakes." Arthur turned slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. His eyes were soft, but there was an intensity to them that made Clara's breath catch. "I understand, but Clara, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I'm not asking you to give up your responsibilities. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm just asking for a chance for us to be together, to see where this could go. That's all." Clara felt a tear escape, though she hadn't realized she was on the verge of crying. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. What if I fail you? What if I fail myself?" Arthur stepped toward her, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Clara. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders alone." His touch was warm, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, Clara allowed herself to feel vulnerable. She leaned into his hand, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't want to fail," she whispered. "You won't," Arthur promised softly. "I'll be here every step of the way." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Clara's relationship with Arthur deepened, but not without its challenges. The dynamics between them at work shifted. People began to notice the subtle glances, the moments that only they shared. It wasn't long before the rumors started. Clara couldn't escape the whispers in the office, but it didn't matter. Arthur's support gave her the confidence she needed to navigate the uncertainty. Meanwhile, at home, Clara found herself able to breathe a little easier. Her grandmother's health had improved slightly thanks to her diligent care, and she was beginning to feel like maybe, just maybe, she could have it all: a career, a relationship, a future. But the real test came when Arthur invited her to an event. He was hosting a high-profile gala for his company. It was a world she had never been a part of, a world where people lived in luxury and talked about things she could barely understand. Clara stood in front of the mirror, her heart pounding. She wore a dress that Arthur had insisted she wear, a beautiful, elegant black gown that made her feel both out of place and completely at home. As she stepped into the ballroom with Arthur by her side, she felt the eyes of the room on them. They were a striking couple, Arthur in his tuxedo, Clara in her gown. But Clara couldn't help but feel small. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, and she wasn't sure if she belonged in a world where wealth and status dictated everything. "Relax," Arthur murmured, sensing her discomfort. "You look stunning, and you belong here with me, Clara. You belong with me." His words were a balm to her insecurities, and for the first time in a long time she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something beautiful. As the night wore on, Clara and Arthur danced under the soft lights of the ballroom. The music swirled around them, a sweet melody that felt like a promise. Clara couldn't help but smile, feeling more alive than she ever had before, and for the first time in her life she truly believed that happiness was within her reach. Arthur pulled her closer, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "Clara, I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you every moment, every step together." Clara closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. For the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following the gala were a blur of meetings, late nights, and quiet moments shared between Clara and Arthur. Their connection had only grown stronger, the trust between them building slowly but surely. Clara had settled into her new role at their company, the one Arthur had arranged for her, and although it felt like a dream come true, she couldn't shake the sense of being out of her depth. Every time she stepped into the office, she was reminded of how far she'd come from her humble beginnings. But no matter how much she tried to bury her insecurities, they always seemed to surface in moments like this one, sitting in the luxurious dining room of Arthur's penthouse, dinner untouched on her plate, while he gazed at her across the table. The elegance of the setting, the expensive wine in her glass, and the way Arthur looked at her with that intense affection, it all felt so surreal. "Clara, is something wrong?" Arthur's voice broke through her thoughts, his brow furrowing slightly in concern. Clara blinked, startled out of her reverie. She offered him a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's just Sometimes it feels like this is all too much, like I don't deserve any of it." Arthur's expression softened. Immediately he pushed his plate aside and leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "Clara, you deserve everything you have and more. You've worked so hard, and you're one of the most genuine, caring people I've ever met. Don't let your past define you. You're here now, and I'm here with you." His words were like a balm to the wounds she didn't even know were still there. Clara took a deep breath, her hand resting on the table as if grounding herself in his presence. "I'm just scared, Arthur, scared that everything will come crashing down. If I'm not perfect, if I make a mistake, I could lose it all." Arthur reached across the table, his hand enveloping hers in a warm, reassuring grip. "You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be yourself, and I'm not going anywhere. I've got your back always." Clara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never been good at letting others help her, at letting herself rely on anyone. But with Arthur, it was different. He made her feel safe in a way no one else ever had. "I don't want to mess this up," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to lose you." Arthur's thumb gently brushed the back of her hand. "You won't lose me, Clara. I'm here for the long haul. We're in this together." The next few days were filled with new beginnings. Arthur continued to support Clara at work, guiding her through challenges, helping her navigate the complexities of the corporate world. Clara, in turn, found herself growing more confident with each passing day. She started to believe in her abilities, to trust that she could succeed on her own merit. But it wasn't just her career that was changing. Clara began to notice the subtle ways in which Arthur's feelings for her deepened. He would steal small private moments, a touch of her hand when no one was watching, a kiss on the forehead when she least expected it. Every gesture, every word made her heart swell with warmth. One evening, after a long day at work, Arthur invited Clara to dinner at a small, intimate restaurant he had reserved just for the two of them. They sat at a corner table, soft music playing in the background, the light from the candles casting a romantic glow across the room. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, but Clara noticed that Arthur seemed quieter than usual, a thoughtful look on his face as he watched her. "Arthur," she asked, her voice laced with curiosity, "what on your mind?" He paused, setting his fork down, and met her gaze. "I've been thinking a lot lately, Clara, about us, about the future." Clara felt her heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" Arthur leaned forward, his expression serious but filled with affection. "I know that things haven't been easy for either of us, but I want you to know that I see a future with you. I want to build something with you, something real. I'm not asking for you to make any promises now, but I need you to know that you have my heart." Clara, tears welled up in Clara's eyes, and she blinked rapidly to keep them at bay. His words were everything she had been afraid to hear, and yet they filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "I never thought this could happen," Clara whispered. "I never thought I could have a life like this." Arthur smiled softly. "You're more than capable, Clara, and you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you every step of the way." The moment hung between them, charged with an intensity neither of them could deny. Clara's heart was pounding in her chest as she realized for the first time that she didn't have to choose between her past and her future. She could have both, and with Arthur by her side, she didn't have to carry the weight of it all alone. After dinner, they walked through the quiet streets of the city hand in hand, the cool evening air wrapping around them like a promise. When they reached her apartment building, Arthur stopped in front of the door, his hand lingering on hers. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said softly, his thumb tracing the back of her hand. Once more Clara nodded, her smile warm but full of emotion. "I can't wait." As Arthur leaned in to kiss her good night, Clara felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had once thought her life was defined by the struggles she had faced, but now she realized that it was the love and the people she surrounded herself with that truly mattered. And with Arthur, she finally had the courage to believe in the future they could create together. Clara woke up the next morning to a soft knock on her door. She rubbed her eyes, still groggy from a restless night, but when she saw the time on her phone, her heart skipped a beat. She had overslept. Hurriedly, she threw on a simple blouse and jeans, her hair still a bit tangled. She rushed to the door, hoping it was just the delivery man bringing her groceries. But when she opened it, she found Arthur standing there, looking as composed and handsome as always, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Good morning," he greeted her warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Clara blinked in surprise. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" He held up a small box, grinning. "I thought you might need some encouragement today." Clara raised an eyebrow, but stepped aside, allowing him in. "What do you mean?" Arthur placed the box on the kitchen counter and turned to face her. "You've been working so hard, Clara. I know things have been overwhelming lately, so I thought you could us a little reminder that you deserve more than just survival. You deserve to thrive." Clara's heart swelled with emotion as she watched him. He always seemed to know just what to say just when she needed to hear it, but she couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. "Arthur, you know I can't just forget about everything. My responsibilities, my grandmother, the bills, the stress. How can I let myself thrive?" Arthur stepped closer, his hands gently cupping her face. "Clara, you don't have to be everything for everyone all the time. You don't have to carry that weight alone anymore." Clara felt her breath catch in her throat, but before she could respond, Arthur gestured toward the box on the counter. "Open it. I want you to see something." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the box, curiosity getting the better of her. She carefully lifted the lid and gasped when she saw what was inside: a beautiful leather-bound planner embossed with her initials. It was elegant, practical, and exactly the kind of thing she had always wanted, but never thought she could afford. "I don't know what to say," Clara whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Arthur smiled softly, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You don't need to say anything. I just want you to the tools you need to take the next step. You've got this, Clara. I believe in you." The rest of the morning passed in a whirlwind of emotions. Arthur had been true to his word. He wasn't pushing her to make any decisions. He just wanted to help her see that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. With the planner in her hands, Clara felt a sense of clarity she hadn't known in months. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she was allowed to take control of her future. At work, things were busy as usual, but there was something different in Clara's demeanor. She walked with purpose, her head held a little higher. She had been given the space to breathe, to remember that she wasn't just someone who survived, but someone who could truly thrive. Arthur's faith in her, his belief that she could accomplish anything, filled her with the strength she had been lacking. During lunch, Arthur asked if she'd like to join him for a meeting with some investors later in the afternoon. It was an important meeting for the company, and Arthur seemed eager to have her there. As they sat in the conference room, Clara was quiet at first, absorbing the conversation around her. She had never been in such a high-pressure environment before. But as the meeting went on, she found herself growing more confident. Arthur's subtle encouragements, his approving glances, gave her the reassurance she needed to speak up when it mattered. By the time the meeting concluded, Clara felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond just the professional success of the day. She was beginning to realize that she wasn't just a bystander in her own life anymore. She was a participant. And with Arthur beside her, she knew there was nothing she couldn't handle. Later that evening, they sat together in the same restaurant where they had shared that intimate dinner weeks ago. The candlelight flickered softly between them, and the atmosphere was one of calm and understanding. Clara, still processing the events of the day, couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Arthur," she began, her voice quieter than usual, "I don't know how to thank you for everything. You've helped me believe in myself again. I don't know what I'd do without you." Arthur looked at her with those deep, steady eyes, his expression tender. "You don't need to thank me. You've always had everything inside you, Clara. I just gave you a little push. The rest is all you." Clara felt a warmth bloom in her chest, the realization of how far they had both come in such a short time. But it wasn't just about her growth, it was about their growth as a couple, as two people who had learned to lean on each other, to trust, to let go of their fears. "I'm still scared," Clara confessed, her voice barely audible, "but I'm willing to take the leap with you. I trust you, Arthur. I trust us." Arthur reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "And I trust you, Clara. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As they left the restaurant and walked down the street hand in hand, Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For so long she had been afraid of losing control, of trusting someone else with her heart. But Arthur had shown her a different way, one where love was not a weakness, but a strength. In that moment, under the soft glow of the streetlight, Clara knew she was ready for whatever the future held. With Arthur by her side, she was no longer afraid to dream. The weeks passed quickly, and Clara found herself immersed in a whirlwind of changes. Her confidence grew daily, not just at work, but in her personal life as well. Arthur's support and belief in her were unwavering, and the more she saw of him, the more she realized how much he had come to mean to her. But there were still moments of doubt, moments when Clara wondered if she was truly ready to give her heart completely to someone, especially someone like Arthur. After all, he was a billionaire with a world of connections, and she was still the girl who had grown up in a modest apartment working hard to make ends meet. One evening, as Clara sat at her small kitchen table looking over her grandmother's medical bills, the doorbell rang. She was surprised it wasn't like Arthur to visit without warning, but when she opened the door she found him standing there holding a bouquet of flowers and a soft smile. "Hi," he said gently, stepping closer. "Can we talk?" Clara nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips, though her mind was still clouded with worry. "Of course. What's going on?" Arthur's gaze softened, and he placed the bouquet in her hands. "I've been thinking a lot lately about us, about everything that's happened, and I realized something." He took a deep breath. "Clara, I'm falling for you in a way I never thought possible." Her heart fluttered, but Clara's expression remained uncertain. She stepped back, holding the flowers to her chest as if they might protect her from the emotions swirling inside. "Arthur, I don't know if I can be what you need." He reached out, gently taking her hands in his. "What do you mean?" Clara took a breath, her voice trembling slightly. "You have this whole world, Arthur, the business, the investors, the money. I'm just a girl trying to get by, trying to take care of my grandmother. I don't want to be just another one of your distractions." Arthur's eyes softened, and he squeezed her hands. "Clara, you're not a distraction. You're everything. I didn't fall for your circumstances. I fell for you, the woman who saved me that night, the woman who's strong enough to carry her family through hard times. You don't need to change for me." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm not like you," she whispered. Arthur cued her face, lift her chin so that their eyes met. "You're right, you're not like me. But that doesn't matter. You don't have to be like me to be worthy of love. Clara, you're more than enough." For a long moment Clara just stood there, feeling his words wash over her. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift, and she realized that perhaps love wasn't about being perfect. It was about accepting each other's imperfections, about standing by each other through the ups and downs. Arthur leaned in, his voice soft but full of conviction. "I know this isn't easy, but I'm here, Clara. I'm here for you, and I want to build a life with you, all the parts of you." She felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from relief. She knew in that moment that she could finally let go of her doubts, that love didn't have to be complicated, it could just be simple if she let herself believe in it. The next few days passed in a blur of emotions. Threw herself into her work, now with a new sense of purpose. Arthur, as always, was there, guiding her through the challenges and celebrating the victories. The more time they spent together, the more Clara realized how deeply she had come to care for him, not because of his wealth, but because of his kindness, his strength, and the way he made her feel like she was enough just as she was. And then came the moment Clara had never expected. One evening, as they sat together at a quiet dinner, Arthur took her hand across the table, his eyes serious but full of love. "Clara," he said, his voice steady, "I've been thinking about the future, about everything we've been through together, and I want to ask you something." Clara's heart raced in her chest, a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. "What is it?" Arthur, he smiled, his eyes warm. "I know this has been a lot for both of us, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. So I'm asking you now, Clara, to be my partner in every sense of the word. Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air, and Clara felt the world pause around her. Her heart was full, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew that this was the moment she had been waiting for, the leap of faith that would change everything. With a soft smile, she whispered, "Yes, yes, Arthur. I will marry you." The wedding was everything Clara had dreamed of, and more. It wasn't about the extravagance or the lavishness, though Arthur had spared no expense. It was about the love that surrounded them, the simple yet profound promise they made to each other. It was about two people from different worlds coming together to build something beautiful. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in a beautiful garden overlooking a serene lake. Clara wore a simple yet elegant gown, her hair casting and soft waves around her face. Arthur stood by her side, looking every bit the man she had come to love, his eyes full of pride and tenderness. When the vows were exchanged, Clara's heart soared. She spoke from the heart, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "Arthur, you showed me that I could be more than I ever thought possible. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and I promise with all my heart to stand by you in good times and bad forever." Arthur's voice was just as steady, his words full of conviction. "Clara, I promise to love you, cherish you, and support you through everything life brings our way. You are my heart, my home, my everything, and I will never stop loving you." As they exchanged rings, the guests erupted into applause, but for Clara and Arthur. The world felt like it had shrunk to just the two of them in that moment. All the fears, doubts, and uncertainties of the past melted away. They were embarking on a new journey together, hand in hand. As they danced their first dance, Clara looked into Arthur's eyes, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. She had come so far from the girl struggling to make ends meet to the woman who had found not only love, but a partner, someone who believed in her more than she had ever believed in herself. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, Clara was excited to see where the journey would take them together. We loved having you here. Share in the comments what you thought of the story and how we can make it even better next time.